the only international introduction and the opportunity to be here with you today. Um, so, if I may start with the following remark, namely that contrary to statements from sources that are close to neoconservatist or authoritarian regimes, democracy is not a propaganda topic, but it's really one of the cornerstones of the European peaceful project and of coexistence that encompasses also compliance with the human rights principles of the Council of Europe and also the principle of the rule of law, without which you cannot have a functioning democracy and an effective protection of the human rights. The democratic backsliding that is often mentioned in recent times in international documents, including from the Council of Europe, has become an increasing reality, I think, for many Europeans in recent years. The backsliding is sometimes brutal, or it can also take forms of a very progressive and insidious degradation, which would be obviously less visible. In response, the Council of Europe held a summit of heads of states and government at Reykjavik, hence the name of the Reykjavik Principles, in 2023, and proclaimed at the end of the summit the adoption of the Reykjavik Principles for democracy, which are meant to serve as benchmarks and support the revival of our ideals. One could also maybe say support the discovery of our ideals for the younger generations that have been fed with more mainstream discourses over the social media over the last 20 years or so. So all this illustrates a process of recommitment and engagement from the member states, it has been in the meantime also comforted by the new Democratic Pact for Europe that was announced by the Council of Europe just a few months ago, and that is currently in the process of implementation, and that will to some extent also build on the Reykjavik acquis and the principles for democracy. So the Reykjavik Principles for Democracy, what is their origin and what are the core values? There are 10 principles in the document. They can be grouped together into 5 strands concerning the democratic participation, the independent and effective democratic institutions, the democratic governance and integrity, the democratic freedoms, inclusion, and civil society, and the democratic future. The 10 principles cover such subjects as the need to actively enable and encourage democratic participation, the need to hold free and fair elections and referenda in accordance with international standards. They all recognize the freedom of association, including for the creation of political parties. They refer to the need to maintain and protect independent and effective parliaments and other democratic institutions. They refer to the need to uphold the separation of powers with appropriate checks and balances, to ensure also independent, impartial, and effective judiciaries. The need also to pursue a relentless fight against corruption, also to ensure the right to freedom of expression. The need also in a long-term perspective to invest in a democratic future through inclusive democratic processes. and particularly the participation of young persons in democratic life and decision-making processes. It reaffirms under Principle 9 that civil society is important for a functioning democracy. And last and not least, it refers to the need to ensure the full and equal and meaningful participation in political and public life for all, including or in particular for women and girls. So there is nothing fundamentally new, I think, among these 10 principles, but I do believe that this declaration has and that was the objective of the drafters of this text. It was to have a practical document, which is not too long, so it should be user-friendly for everyone interested, that would define within a few principles what a genuine democracy can be or should be. The idea of this document is to increase the ability also to discern at an early stages situations of backsliding, which is something that the Council of Europe has been confronted with in recent years. Obviously, because we are speaking of the Reykjavik Principles for Democracy, and in the context of the backsliding, the list of principles refers, I would say, to all the areas which have seen problematic trends in recent years, and therefore we can say that this document has a historical anchorage in the current period. Maybe if people will draft another similar text in 30 years' time, maybe they would give another content. But we have still in these principles a number of what I would call intangible mechanisms, like separation of power and the independence and impartiality of the judiciary. Some principles are quite detailed, and in particular, Principle 7, when it comes to freedom of expression, as it refers to the protection of journalists and combating disinformation and misinformation, and Principle 10, which was, as I said before, about participation in political and public life for all, as it insists a lot on the participation of women and girls, and also to the need to prevent violence, fear, harassment, hate speech, and hate crime, as well as discrimination on any grounds. This is obviously because we have seen in the countries that are experiencing neoconservative movements, a kind of resurgence of sexist hate speech sometimes. So how can these principles serve as guidelines for the promotion of the democratic governance, especially in times of democratic backsliding? Well, I think, first of all, any list or listing and enumeration of principles or rights or obligations will need at some stage some sort of translation into more concrete and usable components. One can make a parallel with the 10 Commandments of the biblical religions, of the European Convention on Human Rights, or when you consider also the internal regulations of a corporate entity, for instance, the ethical principles that they would adopt. Often that's a simple document. So then you need to translate these principles into more concrete substance, and that's the role when it comes to the European Convention on Human Rights. It's the role of the European Court to add through case law and jurisprudence more meaning to it. And the Council of Europe is doing exactly the same at the moment. There is work going on for the elaboration of some concrete benchmarks, or they are called officially parameters, that would then translate these 10 principles into more actionable components, which are actually based and bring together a sort of compilation of all the relevant Council of Europe standards that have been adopted over the last 50 years, but also the results from the practice, especially from the monitoring activities of the Council of Europe in the different areas, and also other activities. A draft has been prepared of these parameters. The review is underway in the light of a recent public consultation, and we are looking forward to the availability of the document in the first quarter of 2026. The principles, if you look at the way they are drafted in the form of do's and don'ts, are addressed to the states. It is the responsibility of the states who took these commitments to ensure that these principles will be upheld. So they are first and foremost meant to be used by the public authorities to promote democratic practices. And possibly also to assess continuously their own level of conformity with these. But actually, they can be used by all those who are interested in developing work about their use and the promotion and implementation of these principles. One could think, obviously, of academics, of civil society, think tanks, but also political parties, when these are engaged in the education of citizens. You know that in certain countries, political parties have foundations that have as the core role the education of their members, but also the public at large. But also, obviously, education institutions might also be interested in developing the promotion of these principles in the context of their training and education curricula, which is something increasingly important, and that's reflected also in principle number 8 regarding investing in a democratic future by ensuring that everyone is able to play a role in democratic processes. Also, from an international perspective, one could imagine that probably some operators in the economic and political or civil society sphere would be interested in using such principles for some rankings or assessments, risk assessments, general threat assessments, and the monitoring of domestic national situations. In the context of the democratic backsliding, all this work, the principles and the parameters, will also help identify problematic or questionable practices that have been observed in recent years, such as the manipulation of legislation on either the constitutional level or the electoral field, from people who, or by people who want to stay in power, the silencing of the opposition by abusive or fabricated accusations, or I'm saying that now with a tone of sense of humor, also, you know, the accidental falling through the window that we have seen in some countries, but also the dismissal of locally elected mayors by the central government as soon as these locally elected politicians and leaders are part of the opposition. We have also seen the silencing of watchdog actors, civil society, obviously, activists, the media, by means of strategic lawsuits or SLAPs, according to the English acronym. Abusive prosecutions, restrictive legislation on the sources of funding, the misuse also of anti-crime mechanisms concerning the fight against terrorism, money laundering, or on grounds of state security and the maintenance of public order. We have also seen abusive conducts with regard to the legislative processes, such as the excessive use of emergency and expedited legislative procedures, sometimes with laws or reforms passed overnight, in Parliament by avoiding mandatory consultations or by avoiding preliminary assessments and impact studies that are normally meant to be produced. We have also experienced in recent years corruption in its various forms, and that includes obviously bribery and trading in influence, but also conflicts of interests, which is something that has been discovered in recent years through the international monitoring. Many countries had a limited experience with the management of conflicts of interests, but also other forms of problematic conduct that don't necessarily fall as such under criminal law, namely forms of nepotism, cronyism, clientelism, the selling of owners and titles. We have also experienced or seen in many member countries the manipulation of laws, privatizations, public procurement, energy or utility-related subcontracting, etc., and also various ways of interfering with the independence of the judiciary when it comes to the appointment process, the misuse of disciplinary mechanisms, and the same goes to a similar extent with the instrumentalization of the prosecution work. They are in a different situation compared to judges, who are often considered to be the core professionals of the judiciary, but the prosecutors are in parallel an equally important component of the judiciary. And they are because they are under the authority of the government and can thus both receive instructions, which should normally be avoided in individual cases, but they are also meant to keep the minister responsible for their activity informed about cases going on, so that can give rise to leaking of important information that would benefit the suspects who are too close to the government. We have also seen the populistic campaigns and propaganda against fundamental values and the designation of scapegoats, and also obviously interference in foreign affairs and elections. So what about now the perspective for civil society of all this? We can say that civil society can contribute to the promotion of these principles and their use and their implementation in three different ways: through education and awareness raising. That's number one. Also through their advocacy work. That's number two, and probably also through their watchdog function, although this is not necessarily something which is very, very widespread in civil society, but the most effective watchdogs are usually from, international NGOs that have an important voice in this field. So civil society actors can contribute obviously to the education of their members and sympathizers or the users of their services. And that all depends obviously on the activities that civil society actors are conducting. One can also think again of the importance of educating the younger generations. Hence the role of the education system, and also of convincing, therefore, the authorities that are responsible for education at local or national level to maybe take into account these principles and elements of the parameters in the development of possible schooling curricula. When I was myself a teenager in the lower classes, we had civic education courses, but they have been abandoned after a short time for lack of funding, as far as I remember. One could also think of the role of authorities and bodies or institutions that have a snowball effect and can amplify the the dissemination of knowledge and awareness about these democratic principles. So there's definitely a role for civil society also to convince those institutions to consider making use of these. Then obviously there's a possibility also to engage with the authorities where the relations are the closest to local NGOs, namely the local and regional authorities, but also through the associations of local authorities, to develop projects with them, or to raise their awareness about the use of these principles, and to with a view to their incorporation into local practices. NGOs, I think, and civil society actors more generally can also use the principles in their own direct work, especially where they perform advocacy and watchdog functions, to promote good practices and to identify problematic phenomena. And that can happen in each and every sector where an NGO would be active, whether it deals with the supply of social services and charity services to the population, when they detect mismanagement in the allocation of state subsidies, for instance, to social activities, or when it comes to human rights watchdog, who can discern dysfunctioning situations in the judiciary, for instance, or in the police activities, and so on. So just to say that democratic governance is potentially relevant everywhere, in health and development policies, environment and climate protection, the distribution of public aid and social services, and the functioning of the public institutions on a daily basis. So for advocacy purposes, I think two areas are more particularly interesting, and I'm thinking of Principle 1 of these Reykjavik Principles, which is to actively enable and encourage democratic participation. So there's clearly a possibility for civil society interested in the subject to promote and develop democratic participation processes, whether at the local and regional level or at the national level. Another important principle, which is principle number 2, which concerns freedom of assembly and association, but also principle 9 on that refers specifically to the need to support and maintain a safe and enabling environment for civil society and human rights defenders. And this is an increasingly important topic at the moment. There have been many calls from NGOs to develop activities to better protect and address attacks on civil society and human rights defenders at the moment. And I must say that the international community and organizations are brainstorming at the moment on how to increase the level of protection they can afford. So to conclude very quickly, how optimistic can we be with regard to the future use of these Reykjavik Principles? I would say there are maybe 3 types of situations. First, the situation of authoritarian regimes where everything is under tight control. Clearly, the impact of these Reykjavik Principles and the ability of civil society and other actors interested in promoting the principles will be very limited and difficult because of the threats that there are also for those who could promote these principles. Then the second case would be the case of countries that already do quite well or that do very well. Well, let's say that then the Reykjavik Principles could encourage them to do even better, if I may say so. And third case, and that's maybe the most interesting one, that's the countries where we have bad guys in government, but who benefit from say, a support of 30% in the population, but also a 30% of the population that is opposing the policies, and where the rest of the population would be silent. And I think that it is this proportion of the population who hasn't made their mind that can make a difference at the next elections, or in the short term, if there is a possibility to prompt a motion of no confidence against the government. And I think these 40% of the population can probably be a target of education and awareness raising activities about these principles and the concept of democratic governance. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christophe. Thank you. It was really interesting and insightful. So thank you so much for your participation. I leave the floor to Viorica. If the participants have any question, they can write them in the chat and then we'll answer them afterwards. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to present shortly our project, the Bridge to COIE, to Council of Europe, and I will start with the thoughts of Christophe. He shared that this project started from the premise of Europe's democracy backsliding, polarization, disinformation, and that these all things lead to reducing civic participation. And that fact needed to be addressed to strengthen democracy and to increase communities' engagement in decision making and a more active involvement in society. So the aim of the project is to support democratic values and participation, and to empower civil society with Council of Europe standards, and to create new opportunities for collaboration and to set bridges between civil spaces. This project has a geographical focus in Eastern Europe, particularly in Moldova and Ukraine, and in Southern Europe, particularly with actions in Italy. At the heart of the bridge action was a set of concrete activities designed to empower local actors and foster democratic resilience on following areas. First of all, to increase awareness about standards and the tools of Council of Europe for NGOs and civil society. Also to foster dialogue on the evolution of civic spaces and on the challenges and democratic resilience, and to enhance capacities to participate into the Council of Europe processes and engagement opportunities for civil society. At this stage, ALDA organized a hybrid workshop named Civil Society Steps Up for Democracy Resilience that took place in Italy and aimed to strengthen civil society participation in the Council of Europe processes, and also the participants in this event and actors of civil society, together with experts, explored how organizations can engage with Council of Europe institutions to how to implement or to understand Reykjavik Principles for democracy, and focusing on representation, participation, and deliberation. Another event took place recently in Chisinau with a generic name, Council of Europe Standards and Tools for Civil Participation, that gathered together about 70 civil society representatives, local authorities, and donors representatives from Ukraine and Moldova. And they all together explore Council of Europe recommendations on civic participation, and also foster cross-border solidarity, and after offer practical insights into strengthening right-based civic engagement. The Chisinau conference provided an inspiring space for exchange, dialogue, and partnership, reinforcing our common values and shared duty to stand united in times of democratic backsliding. One of the highlights of the event was discovering the practical initiatives shared by participants from Moldova and Ukraine that boosted up citizen engagement in decision making in their communities. All of these actions were backed by a strong communication and dissemination strategy that relies on a large audience that ALDA has. ALDA has a network of more than 300 members and partners across Europe and beyond. Thus, we implemented different actions, communication actions on our channels, and also disseminated this important information and raise awareness across ALDA's events. And one of the most prominent this year was the General Assembly, which took place in Rome and was held in conjunction with the Ukrainian Recovery Conference. Thus, we succeeded to amplify visibility and stakeholder engagement. More than a project, the Bridge to Council of Europe action serves as a platform linking civic spaces in Southern and Eastern Europe with institutions European and supporting these states in their journey towards democratic consolidation. Thus, ALDA continues to build bridges between citizens, institutions, European values, and advancing a collective commitment to democracy, participation, and resilience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Viorica. Thank you. And I leave the floor to our last speaker now, Anastasia, if you want. And if you want to share your screen, you should be able to do that.
Yes, thank you very much, Elena. I'm trying to do this now. If you can admit my... Okay, great. So I wanted also to present a bit the situation from the perspective of Ukraine. We work in ALDA with the method called local democracy agencies to actually build this bottom-up approach for democracy. And what mentioned my colleague Viorica before about Moldova is also very true for Ukraine, more so now because Ukraine is in the state of war. So I think that Ukraine will be a great example and also a study case of how it works during wartime, because luckily we don't have such a huge wars in other countries. And so just in Ukraine we can see and we can learn from the experience of Ukraine what does it mean. But this is true because the society in Ukraine needs it. So Ukrainian people, they want democracy. Ukrainian people, they want to be the part of European Union. They want to share European values. So all the processes of democracy in Ukraine are mostly possible because of the decision of its people and priorities of its people. And nevertheless, the first priority, of course, is to defend the country, but not just to defend it, but also to move forward and to make it better and to rebuild it in a better way, in a more sustainable way. And in a way when Ukraine is the part of European Union, not on paper, but literally because of how it works in Ukraine. To help Ukraine, ALDA uses this method called local democracy agencies, which was actually an idea back 30 years ago after the war in Balkans, and actually proved itself to be very efficient when local authorities sometimes they don't have enough instruments to move on and to be resilient. So these local democracy agencies, they are registered in Ukraine local NGOs. Currently, we have 6 of them in Ukraine. The first one opened in 2015, so basically before this full-scale invasion, but after the local invasion of Russia in Ukrainian territories. So all these 10 years, more than 10 years of work, we have the experience of working for democracy in a situation of instability and situation of war. And these local democracy agencies are supported by European donors and by ALDA to promote bottom-up approach and civic engagement at local level. Ukraine is a huge country. Basically, we can suit in just Ukrainian territory 2 countries, more or less like Italy. And for you to understand, about 20% of the territory is occupied. So it is a huge territory. And it is a very diversified territory. So basically, every single region has to have a different attitude because of different needs and different priorities. So now you can see the map of the democracy agencies we managed to open so far and one we want to open. And in every single agency, we need to have a different approach because, for example, Kharkiv, you can see it's a city where just today they were bombed by all those air bombs. And for example, Vinnytsia is a place where it is more or less safe, so they can work on something like no hate speech or something like women inclusion, while for Kharkiv, the main priority is just to be able to function well on local level, and all local authorities are trying at least to keep the functioning and basic functions for democracy met. What is also interesting about Ukraine and what ALDA tries to do together with the Ukrainian local actors. In these recent years of full-scale invasion, we tried, of course, to help in humanitarian means, but also to provide like some citizen consultation. We work with LD Mariupol. Mariupol, is under occupation, but they relocated. They have the government in exile. The mayor of Mariupol, who works not from Mariupol, of course, but from the territory under Ukrainian control for its citizens. So the city which is occupied for its territory works and lives beyond its territory, having a mayor, having the public consultations, having the government to try to actually keep all the citizens who are now internally displaced people together as a community and build on this community, even though their city is not accessible now. Also empowerment of women and youth, because now many men are fighting, a huge number of men are fighting. So women has to take the lead, not just because women want to take the lead, women need to take the lead because there is no one else. So this is a survival also question that we have to empower women. Otherwise, unfortunately, we already see the lack of people. We already see the lack of qualified people in many professions, and of course in civil society. And so basically, if we don't invest in empowering women and young people who are not now enrolled in the army, we won't be able to move on, because of course it is all based on people. inclusive support services for displaced persons, because since the first people they relocated from Donbass in 2014, some of them still struggle to feel included in the society. And we are not talking now about people who relocated in 2022, because it is a huge problem. People move to a different city, to a different community, and to become integrated in this community, to become active in this community, they of course need time, but also the initiative. And the initiative has to come from the local authorities and from the community. So they feel the part of the community and they are proactive in the community. And also the inclusive support for veterans, because people who come back from war, they cannot live the same life anymore. And they need also to be included in the society again. And this initiative has to come not just from volunteers, but also from organizations who have, let's say, the knowledge and the opportunity to do so. And of course, community-based reconstruction, because just the community knows better what they need. The central government cannot know better what this or that community need. And that's why we have, and we are trying to encourage it and support it as ALDA, to have this community-based approach, to have the dialogue with the municipalities and see how to do better, but in a way municipalities need. This is the example of Mariupol. I told you before that they have about, 200,000 displaced residents across 15 regions, but this data keeps changing because some people, they keep trying to find their place in the city, in the country. Some people, they moved maybe abroad and now turning back to Ukraine. But it is a huge community, and the job done by the mayor of Mariupol and by the vice mayors is a great example of how city and the community is not about the territory, is about people and about having the same values, having the same priorities and the same needs, of course, in this case. Then also diaspora. Diaspora plays a huge role in Ukrainian context, and people who are doing advocacy for Ukraine abroad are also doing a huge piece of work. There are lots of associations of Ukrainians in different countries, in Italy, in Germany, in Poland, and they're advocating for Ukraine. We're trying also to be in touch with them because their help is also vital. Being not in Ukraine, being not in country in war, they sometimes can reach local authorities in Europe, and they can also build bridges between Ukrainian municipalities and municipalities in Europe for further cooperation and for creating the partnerships. Also, I wanted to share a bit of data because it is hard now to collect the data in Ukraine having its territory under occupation, some of the territory, but the numbers are sometimes impressive because people, they trust actually not the local governments. You see that 61% of people, they distrust local governments. But nevertheless, they really feel strong attachment to their countries. And they also trust institutions who are NGOs, who are locally based activists, and who are trying to do a significant work, even though maybe they are not actually the people who have the mandate. That's why, because of this, we have a very active society. And people who are not afraid to show their opinion about the government, to criticize the government, and to do something if they can, of course, and not sit and wait when the government does it. That is why Ukraine is so resilient, and was resilient even in 2014, when we basically didn't have the army, just because the society is not sitting and waiting the government to change something or to do something. And also because actually we have this decentralization reform. It is one of the most successful reforms in Ukraine so far. It also created empowerment for municipalities. And actually now they feel more strong, and they feel actually that they can do more and reach more. And that local leaders also, they feel more responsibility and more opportunities. And actually, reflecting on the Reykjavik Principles, we also believe that this method of local democracy agencies, we have now 6, but would like to have at least 10 in Ukraine, can help, because these local NGOs, they are very much sustainable. They also promote solidarity. They also promote engagement. They also promote this bottom-up approach. They are very active. Nevertheless, full-scale invasion is ongoing. They are trying to implement the principles of transparency, open reporting, and show it, because sometimes, let's say, politicians who are local actors, they are from the old system. They are not really aware of new mechanisms of transparency, of open reporting. They have to learn. And the local activists are those who basically can bring this knowledge, because they are learning a lot. And also from these local democracy agencies, there is a lot of initiative coming in inclusion to ensure that voices of women, veterans, young people are actually heard. So that is why we strongly believe in that. And this is something that it has still to be discovered, because we are in process of adjusting the social life to the situation of war, and also adjusting to the norms and rules and values of European countries. So this is still the process ongoing, and that is a great opportunity also to make this ongoing process better and to have in the end better results, actually. And I wanted here to stop and that now for Ukraine, democracy is something we are fighting for. It's not a given. And this is actually what maybe makes a difference, because we still believe in it so much. We still pay attention to it so much, and we still really would like to get to the point where democracy is seen everywhere in the country. That is something that creates lots of course, opportunities, and also lots of motivation to work with Ukraine, to work for Ukraine, and also to promote this bottom-up approach when we work with civil society, with their engagement, to see actually then maybe small projects, maybe small results, but still visible. And we still believe that they make a lot of difference, actually. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. Thank you. It was a really amazing presentation, and thank you so much for sharing as well as your experience, we can say, and everything. It really stands off. Doing a little can really make a change. So thank you for that. And I leave the floor to Julia to moderate a bit the panel discussion. And I remind the participants, if they have any question, feel free to write them in the chat, because I don't feel like we will have much time to discuss them. So maybe then we can write you an email and put you in contact with our speakers. Thank you.
I also want to thank all of you for your insightful contribution, and also for sharing your experiences. So now I'd like to open the panel discussion concerning civil society as the core art of democracy. So Anastasia, I'd like to start with you. We know that cooperation has always been one of ALDA's strongest assets. And I'd like to ask you, from your perspective, how can cooperation between ALDA, the Council of Europe, and local actors be further strengthened in the upcoming years?
Thank you very much for this question, Julia. And actually here, the first thing which comes to my mind is to strengthen and to support peer exchanges between Europeans and Ukrainians, because Ukrainians are very open to learn. We really want to absorb the good practices, the good experience, also the bad, to know how not to do. That's why all the projects we have also seen and witnessed as local democracy agencies, where the peer exchanges are involved, they always work great because under the guidance of European institutions, Ukrainian actors, they can really learn a lot and then can bring the knowledge to Ukraine and make other also learn from them. And also the cooperation on the topics I mentioned before, like youth empowerment, democratic literacy, also women empowerment, because we really think that and believe that just community-based resilience hubs, I would say, the community-based resilience and approaches are really effective in Ukraine. And so basically, if the cooperation points on those things, I guess it will be fruitful, it will be meaningful. And also, I guess that it is really great, and Ukraine and the Ukrainians are thankful for the Ukraine flagships when they are present in different European and international institutions. Because when the institution has the flagship, it also means that Ukraine is important, Ukraine is in radar. And that is also something that makes this collaboration then stronger, because it is not an occasional one from project to project, but something that goes on, because we want it not to be just now until Ukraine enters the European Union. We want it to be from now and on in decades and decades to come.
Thank you very much for your answer. That was really helpful. Thank you. And now turning to Dr. Speckbacher, hopefully I pronounced it correctly. How do you think the Reykjavik Principles can become more than just a policy framework? And in your opinion, how can we really embed them into our everyday work of civil organization and local communities? I think that you mentioned some of it before, but yeah, maybe you can further explain as your point of view.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a bit of a tricky question because the civil society is so diverse. If you look at the range of organizations that represent civil society, they work in many different sectors. Not very often in areas that are directly connected with the functioning of the institutions or the accountability of the public institutions, the way the governance is happening, etc., etc. But nonetheless, I do believe there is an opportunity to raise awareness in the context of, through education, through advocacy, through watchdog functions to contribute either in a civil society actors specific area, or also through joining forces with other organizations, NGOs, creating a coalition to get into more ambitious projects. Like, for instance, I found these this idea of the local democracy agencies very, very interesting. That's a very concrete initiative where besides the lobbying with the public institutions, you can also engage in probably in cooperation, very concrete cooperation projects with the public institutions, especially at the local level. Obviously, I think that you also need to ensure that the capacities of an NGO are there, both in terms of expertise and in terms of autonomy. When I say autonomy, it's autonomy vis-a-vis the resources. Why I'm saying that? Because I've seen in many countries NGOs being too dependent on a single source of funding, be it from the the own state or being from foreign sources. And when that happens, there are two things. One is that you cut ties. You don't have the ties with the grassroots people, the citizens who are meant to work with you or with whom you are meant to work. And at the same time, you expose yourself. It's like a company, basically. If you rely on a single customer to buy your products, if that customer disappears, we see it nowadays with the US aid funding that is disappearing. I've also seen it in a number of countries where NGOs were particularly involved in advocacy. If you rely too much on the subsidies of your own state, I mean public subsidies, when you're recognized as a public interest organization and you can benefit from public support, etc. Obviously, it might put an NGO in an awkward position to criticize the state that is the hand of which is feeding the organization. I saw it several times. I had lengthy discussions sometimes with friends in national NGOs who were completely ignorant of how to raise funds from a variety of sources in order to become more independent and to be able to conduct a real advocacy and watchdog work with regard to the implementation of international standards on the good democratic governance, accountability requirements, transparency, fight against corruption, etc.
Thank you very much for your insightful answer. And now I have a couple of questions for Viorica. So from your perspective, what is the role of the NGOs and civil society organization in bridging institution and citizens? Like, how can they make this connection more effective and inclusive?
Of course, NGOs and generally civil society has an important role serves as a channel of communication between citizens and state, making the voice of citizens and bringing needs and make them priorities into policy relevant language to authorities. Then it can also NGOs has this role to represent marginalized citizens or underrepresented groups, and it's essential that they can promote the transparency and accountability of public authorities for citizens' benefit. Also, these like an army of of providers of education, and they are the main actually in our country, and I think in other countries, sector that can educate people and promote this democratic culture in the society. And who else then NGOs can advocate for policy changes and for human rights in a country, and be a watchdog of democratic backsliding. And particularly now, the NGOs are the main partners of EU integration process, and they leads and push the needed reforms for this process. And how can this be improved? By supporting civil society, by supporting NGOs and with technical resources and financing, and enabling environment, which ALDA is doing and uses different tools or methods. Even as Anastasia said, we have this tool of local democracy agencies setting in neighborhood countries who are acting actually as the hubs and our representatives to translate the democratic standards and values into some actions locally grounded. And through these local democracy agencies, we can better engage with local authorities, with citizens from different countries, and also to do this educational work and support these consultations and collaboration between authorities and citizens. Also, ALDA is working through different granting schemes, and this is a real support for grassroots organizations to finance and to be visible at local level and to make an impact. And also they have like a tool to connect with local authorities and to set this collaboration. Also, ALDA is a great opportunity, creates great opportunities for networking between different members and countries, and thus also enables NGOs from different countries to increase their capacities and be more relevant in their localities and communities, and to have access to educational programs to increase their capacities. That's we can do, and we are doing.
Thank you very much, Viorica. I have just one more question for you. So, as you told us, like both Moldova and Ukraine have gone through significant democratic transformation, and has experienced these very challenging contexts. So, like, what lesson can be drawn from their experience and for the broader European democratic landscape? Like, what other countries in Europe can learn from those countries?
So we have this recent opportunity to engage with Ukrainian colleagues during the conference in Chisinau. So we learned that we have almost the same challenges. Of course, Ukraine is faced with terrible war, and maybe they have less opportunities than Moldovan civil society, but still we saw that we have some common things, to say that in common, yes. But we discuss that democracy actually can stand and even strengthen in the face of external aggression. Yes, we saw that this Russian aggression against Ukraine strengthen civil society and make them more united against a common, aggression. While in Moldova faces constant, interferences in political life, constant propaganda, disinformation, and this invisible war of Russia. And still we faced these threats, and we won in parliament elections. So this is our common strength for both countries. We are proud of. Also, we talked about that civil society and civic engagement is crucial for democratic survival. And in both countries, grassroots organizations, independent journalists, and young movements have been like pivotal in resisting authoritarian tendencies and promoting accountability. Also, the perspective of the European membership is a catalyst for reforms. And around this idea and common goal of both countries, like civil society, like, are more active to participate and to be a real partner in supporting these reforms, in consultations for these policies, new policies which we need to adapt and adjust according to European recommendations. Both countries demonstrated that this crisis make us stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so right. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for sharing your thoughts. And yeah, what I can say is that it's clear from your insight that civil society, NGOs, does not just support democracy, but it keeps steps by step, keeps it alive through daily commitment, cooperation, and also indeed civic engagement. So thanks all of you once again. And then now leave the floor to Elena.
Yes, I can see that Christophe has a raised hand, so feel free to I leave the floor to him.
Yes, like I just wanted to add another comment which concerns the experience from the ELOGE label, the European Label of Governance Excellence, which is run by the Congress of Local Authorities, and I think with which ALDA is particularly familiar. I think this is an interesting, very interesting concept that could probably be inspirational for any initiative in future by the local authorities in cooperation with civil society and those who could be associated to it, to develop a similar process with regard to the Reykjavik Principles. The ELOGE is not used by that many municipalities nor by that many member states, so it wouldn't be redundant, I would say, with the ELOGE process. It would complement it, and I think that's an interesting example to learn from as well and to draw inspiration from. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. I think we saw very interesting examples all throughout this session. So thank you so much. And thank you to Julia to have moderated this panel discussion. I think it was really interesting. Also, I saw that there are no questions in the chat, but I think we actually did. Julia said a very interesting and insightful question, and I think they are the most common ones when we think about like policy frameworks and how to really engage them and not only be on paper but also in practice. So I thank you all so much for your participation. And I saw also that Christophe shared with us something in the chat, some links. So I will make sure to write them by email to all our participants. And of course, I will give them also your contacts. So if they have any questions, they can contact you. And that's it if there is no hand risen. So thank you all so much for coming to this ALDA Talk and for participating, first of all, to our speakers, but as well as our participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you
nice
very much.
afternoon.
Goodbye.
Bye.